Welcome back to Newsmaker Live. As you can see, no, I'm not Clinton Reynolds, but I'm sitting in for him this week and next week. My name is Jerry George, and today we're looking at Big Brother's program that is being introduced in St. Lucia. In fact, it has been introduced in St. Lucia to a certain extent. We're looking forward now to a formal launch of the program sometime very soon. And my guest is Mr. Patrick Farrer, a senior counselor at the Boys Training Center. Does that mean that you're going to introduce the Big Brothers program only at the Boys Training Center?
No, but let me just reiterate, it's Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Big Sisters, all right.
And one of the things, too, that we should understand, when it started in the United States, it was Big Brothers, and it continued for decades as Big Brothers, even though you had other groups that were doing work with girls and young women. Back in the late 1970s, there was an amalgamation of the Big Sisters and Big Brothers. So you have one group now, which is called Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America, and Big Brothers, Big Sisters Canada, all over the world. But in terms of what we are doing at the Boys Training Center, one of the areas in which we wanted to at least have a launch was an audience that you could describe as maybe a captive audience. And of course, we also know that the boys at the Boys Training Center, generally speaking, they would stand to benefit immensely by having adults come alongside them and try to pick up the slack where others may not have done what could have been done for them as they were growing up. The fact that we actually started with what we may look at as a captive audience doesn't mean that's all there is to it. As a matter of fact, we have had invitations from schools, we have had invitations from other groups who see the prevailing trend in society, that there are so many young persons who need a solid process of mentoring, or individuals who are able to help them, to come alongside them, build that relationship with them, and somehow guide them to the kind of success which we know deep down is in these young persons.
And I ask the question simply because I know for every boy who is housed at the Boys Training Center, there most probably will be 10 other boys outside that will be needing attention. And that also goes for females as well, as we say big sisters. And even more so, because I think too often when we think of delinquency, we think mostly of boys, but we see a growing trend now towards a lot of females, young women, who are moving in a direction that is causing quite a lot of disruption in our society. So how are you going to do this? Are you working, like, let's say, with the girls up to the Uptown Girls Center? Are you working with the Girl Guides or other organizations to get this as island-wide as possible?
It's one step at a time.
One step at a time.
So right now the focus is Boys Training Center, and of course we will be open as we progress from there to, let's say, the schools and the other bodies in the community who desire our assistance. But as it stands right now, it is just the boys who are actually being impacted by the program. But as you rightly look at it, it will be extended to all these different entities, no matter what the group is, girls and boys.
Now, one of the things I find sadly lacking in St. Lucia is when we call for volunteers, and I think tonight that's what you're here for, to make a call to action for persons who may be interested in, I don't want to use the word, but saving our young men and women, but who want to contribute more positively, I would say, to the lives of our young men and women. There is not sufficient front-end training to provide them with the outlook that will bring about the level of positiveness in the lives of our young persons. Do you anticipate that your program is going to do something different in terms of training the volunteers that you're asking for?
Yes, and one of the good things about our program, it's not something we're starting from scratch.
Okay.
The template for it is already established and is working. For example, let's say the Big Brothers, Big Sisters of New York City or of Toronto or whatever city, virtually all the big cities in the US have a Big Brothers program. The template that we're using, we follow the same training course. In fact, those persons in St. Lucia who have already received training from us, it was the same training material that was used in all the mentoring programs that exist in the United States through the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. And we take training very seriously. We believe that persons should not really be interacting or interfacing with these kids unless they have a solid understanding as to what is mentoring. Because if they mentor or they mentee, the one who's going to be mentored, if they're not understanding what this thing is about, pretty soon you could have confusion. You'd have boys maybe thinking, okay, good, I have a mentor. Oh yeah, he's going to be my cosmic vending machine. He's going to be my grocery buyer. He's going to be my ticket to everything I want. That's not what it is about. And so when the mentors come into the program, they receive the training, their heads are cleared up of any misconception as to what this program is about. And the boys themselves would have been introduced to what mentoring is about for them. And so once you start, then you have, as I mentioned, a template being followed, which has been proven to be very successful in terms of accomplishing the goals of mentoring.
So the training will consist of?
The training consists of, we have broken it down into
modules.
Into different parts. The first aspect of it is just to clarify what is mentoring, to make sure that all the misconceptions that might be in persons' minds are taken out. And of course, in that session, we'd also cover things such as, it's not just anybody who say they want to be a mentor that is really equipped or cut out to be a mentor. Then you'd have the aspect of it where we then, for example, we're having a training on the 18th, which is next week, Wednesday. We'll be having it for the group that received the first training back in March, on March 7th. And part of this will now be focused on how do you work with groups? What are some of the things about groups that you need to understand if you're working with groups? Because mentoring, even though it is done on one-on-one in some cases, there are many cases, and for example with our boys, where it will have to be group work, where we may have in some cases a team, maybe 1 or 2 persons working with some of the boys, or you may have several persons working with a group of boys, and then be able to understand how best to effect the results that you want to gain in a situation like that.
So with that being said, what is the profile like for a volunteer? What are some of the characteristics, or what are some of the attributes you look for in a mentor?
Very good question. One of the things we'd like, first and foremost, is that the person